What's up guys, it's Z here, welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck of the Day. Today we're doing an update in Orcust, a deck that because of Scrap Raptor just got a new fresh life. I mean, this deck is just going to be so much better, so much more consistent now. And the problem with this deck was not that it didn't have a good enough ceiling. I mean, it could do a lot of different things and a lot of good things, it's just that it was not consistent enough. But now with Scrap Raptor and all the other cards that search Scrap Raptor, it's so consistent, it's going to be a huge rogue deck for the upcoming format. And I know there are a lot of people out there that enjoy playing this deck and have been waiting to play it again for so long, ever since Scrap Raptor was first announced for the OCG, and now we're finally here. This is the build that is probably going to be the most viable if you want to play more of like a pure Orcust version. Of course, there are other versions as well. There is a Machina version, there are so many other good versions you can enjoy playing, but I think if you want to play an Orcust version that is more as a pure version as possible, then this is the build you can go with. So before we begin with the video, if you enjoy it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss upcoming content, and now let's get to the deck profile. So starting off with our monsters, we have of course 3 copies of Scrap Raptor. Oh my god, this card is absolutely insane. Come on. We were playing Scrap Recycler before and we were like, when we draw Scrap Recycler, the board we can make is just absolutely insane. The problem was we had just 3 copies of Scrap Recycler. I mean, how consistent is to rely on just the 3 of in order to do some plays? The deck just had to have other cards in the deck that could be able to send the Orcust cards to the grave in order to do more plays, but you weren't able to do the Scrap Wyvern play so consistently, so you were sometimes ending on something like a Masquerena and a Dingirsu in the grave with a Babel, or maybe a Galatia with your Orcust Crescendo set, and that was not enough to be able to be a viable deck. But now the deck is going to see 90% of the time Scrap Raptor or Scrap Recycler in the opening hand because of all the search cards that you have for Scrap Raptor, so it can do the most consistent play. If it goes interrupted, of course, you can do the most consistent play, which is ending on a lot of stuff. I'm going to explain exactly what your end board should look like, but this card just gives the deck that consistency it needed, on top of it having already the power that it needs in order to compete. So yeah, this card being able to give you extra normal and search for your Scrap Recycler, absolutely amazing. 3 copies of Scrap Recycler, of course you need to max this out, and it's not even bad seeing this on top of having a card to search the Scrap Raptor as well, because there is an alternative you can go instead of searching your Scrap Recycler, which is what makes Scrap Raptor so good, because even in the scenario that you draw too many cards and one of them is Recycler, you still have another thing to search that makes your combo even better, which I'm going to explain why that is a little later. We have 2 copies of Scrap Golem. You need to play 2 for 2 reasons. First of all, if you draw the 1 and you only play 1, then you'd have committed so much for your Scrap Wyvern play, and now you cannot do that play. So yeah, you need to play 2 just in case. If you draw 2, I mean, you're the most unlucky person ever and you should go to the next game, but still. But also, there is a way to get 2 Scrap Golems on the field, which refers back to the play I said about Scrap Raptor when you have also drawn your Scrap Recycler being able to search something else, and that card is the Scrap Factory, which is going to get you to another Scrap Golem, so you can get even more mills out of your deck. For the Orcust part of the deck, we have 2 copies of Nightmare. I would not max this out unless I was playing a Machina version. If you're playing Machina version, maxing out on this card is actually really good because of cards like Machina Fortress, so you can send this with Machina Fortress, bring back my Fortress, and then you have the Nightmare in the graveyard to go for the play, so it gives you actually some kind of extension in your hand in case you don't draw the almost optimal hands. But for a pure version, I don't think you need to max this out. You also play a Barricade Blocker in the extra deck just to make sure you can put this card in the grave in case you draw it, so you don't really want to draw it, but you still need to play more than 1 in case you draw it, because you need to send it to the grave with your Scrap Recycler to go into your plays. 1 copy of World 1. You don't need to play more than 1 in any of the other of the Scrap cards, and actually the Orcust cards, sorry, but still, if you think that you're going to banish them with something like Orochi, then yes, you can play more than 1, but just keep in mind that you're going to see them more often, you're going to brick more often, so I think that you just have to be careful with Orochi so you can avoid playing multiple copies, and World 1 is no exception. Same thing with 1 copy of Symbol Skeleton. I mean, this card is basically the disruption of the deck, being able to go for your Babylons using this, and all of these cards, you can just put them back under your Dingirsu from the banish zone, so it's not like you lose them when they get banished, you just get them back to the grave every single time with your Dingirsu. And 1 copy of Brass Bombard. I really like Brass Bombard because it gives you the option of going into your Orcust Nightmare from your hand. Instead of sending the 2nd copy of your Orcust Nightmare from your deck, then you can get another monster on the field to go into another more extender, because if you just keep the 1 in your hand, you send the 2nd one from your deck, then you don't really get anything. But if you use Bombard's effect to special summon the 1 you drew, and then this one goes to the grave, then you can use its effect, so it's basically having 1 more monster on the field. 1 copy of Gizmek Orochi. This card is really good for the deck. It's basically the grind power of the deck that you have in case you go into a really simplified game state, because the deck is not super explosive, especially going 2nd, because you're going to get interrupted. I mean, of course, if you're going 1st, you're going to make a board that pretty much no deck can deal with, because this deck does not lose to stuff like Harpy's Feather Duster or Dark Ruler No More. It has everything that can play from the field, grave, and spell and trap zone, so it's very, very, very hard to deal with this deck when you have let it go through. But this card, if your opponent actually manages to break your board, or if you're going 2nd and you don't do the most optimal play trying to break your opponent's board, that this card is going to win you the games because you send this and then this card will keep coming back. It will give you an extra monster on the field that has a significant amount of attack points and also can banish your extra deck so you can destroy more monsters. So yep, this card, you need to play this one copy just because you can send to the grave very, very easily. One copy of Crystal Rosanix. This is the one you're going to be sending to the grave with your Scrap Recycler turn 1, so you can go for your Scrap Wyvern. It's basically the best one you can send, especially now that Jet Synchro is no longer in the game. We do play a Danger Engine. I think for this deck, if you're looking for extenders, there are a lot of things you can actually put, but Dangers feel like more consistent just because you have a lot of cards that if you draw them, you want to send to the grave. Cards like your Simple Skeleton, your Brass Bombard, your Orcust Nightmare, you need to send them to the graveyard. So having an extender that can do that as well is actually really good. So we have one copy of Nessie, one copy of Jackalope, and one copy of Tsuchinoko. There's no need to play anymore. I think these three are just perfectly fine. It's not like you will need an extender every single time. And I mean, people play a lot of cards that will stop you before you even do your normal summon. So they play cards like Droll, which really hurt this deck, especially because of the cards I will show you a little bit later. But you do play Repercussion to be able to counter that. So it's not like your opponent is just going to ash your Scrap Recycler. Nobody's going to do that unless they have no idea what they're doing against the deck. So they're going to keep the interruption either for Scrap Wyvern, or they will use the interruption like Droll on the start of the turn before you even commit to your Scrap Recycler. So you need to be able to prepare for that. And these cards give you more stuff. They are susceptible to Droll, but I said this deck already loses to Droll. So if you don't draw the out to counter Droll, then you're going to be in a really bad spot anyway, unless you have hard drawn your Scrap Recycler, which is the only way you can play around Droll without having something like a Call by the Grave or your Gamma. For the hand drops, we have 3 copies of Ash Blossom. Of course, it's a most generic hand drop, and we play 3 copies of Gamma, 1 copy of Driver. These give you 2 options. First of all, you can play around Droll because you do play. The next 2 cards I'm going to show you will signify exactly why this deck loses to Droll, but it's absolutely necessary to play them. But also, this card gives you more options because being able to use this during your own turn means that you can go into Anaconda by making your Driver into a Link Spider, and you know what Anaconda does in the deck. You make a Winda that you protect her during the end phase with your Dingirsu, and you have a Winda lock already without even needing to play Dogmatica Engine. So yeah, this gives you more options, and you can play even more cards that don't lose to this deck, just because if you're going second with a deck, then it's very, very hard to break boards. Actually, it depends on what you're playing against, but if you're playing something like a hardcore combo deck like a Dragon Link, it's going to be very, very difficult in order to stop them. So you either need to main deck something like a Dark Ruler No More if you're afraid of that, or you need to play the hand traps I showed you just to make sure that your opponent doesn't make the full board. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very difficult to play. For the spells, we have 3 copies of Fossil Dig. Of course, Scrap Raptor is a dinosaur. You're going to be searching that. And I also play 3 copies of Scrapyard. This adds a Scrap Tuner. Unfortunately, Recycler was not a tuner, so you could not search this before. But Scrap Raptor is a tuner, so yes, you can search Scrap Raptor with this card. And I know this card is a little bit expensive. You can cut it, but you're going to make your 12 starters 9 starters, which is going to decrease the consistency of the deck significantly. And yeah, I think if you can afford this and you want to play the deck as competitively as possible, then you need to play this. Otherwise, you're going to break a lot more. So this is why this card is here. And yes, this is why the deck loses to Droll. If you play cards like Fossil Dig and Scrapyard, your opponent is going to Droll you right there. And this is where the Gamma kicks in, because if you can stop Droll, then you're not going to be able to search your Scrap Recycler with your Scrap Raptor. So you need to make sure that you can fight that. We have 1 copy of Scrap Factory. This is the backup play in case you have actually drawn your Recycler, but you also have a way of getting to one of your Raptors. Then you can search this because you don't need to search another Recycler, and then you can get 2 Golems out of your deck for even more firepower. 1 copy of Orchestrated Return. You need to set this with your Galatia during the very late game. You're never going to set this early because you don't play that many Orcust monsters. It's just a backup plan because it's better than playing 2 copies of Crescendo. You don't really need 2 copies of Crescendo because this card can actually give you an extender in the bad hands. The bad hands are usually the ones that you have a lot of Orcust cards in your hand or you want without being able to get into a Raptor. So this might give you the extra draw you need in order to get to a play. 1 copy of Babel. Of course, this card can reset itself a million times, so as long as you don't banish it with your Orochi, it will be good to go. And we do play a lot of one of staples. First of all is Instant Fusion. So this card, usually you send this with your Anaconda to go for your Winda, then you protect your Winda by it being destroyed by Instant Fusion during the end phase with your Ndigir, so you have the Winda lock. But if you hard draw this card, I also play another target in the extra deck, will help you play through cards like Droll. In case your opponent has Droll, they have 3 copies of them in the deck, and you have 5 ways to be able to play around that, so it gives you a better chance of you having an auto Droll than your opponent having Droll. So this is why I think also being able to stop Droll with Instant Fusion makes sense. 1 copy of Foolish Burial. Of course, this is Orcust. You need to send as many monsters to the grave as possible. 1 copy of Monster Reborn. Sometimes your Recycler is going to get Gamma. Sometimes you can do other stuff with Monster Reborn. This gives you the extender that if your opponent sometimes, like maybe they can decrow your monster or Skullmeister or something in your grave, then this will give you the extra extender you need. You can also play Almiraz in the extra deck if you think that your opponent is actually going to stop Recycler, but I don't think anyone is going to stop Recycler. This deck has just been out for so long that pretty much everyone who knows how to play knows that if they stop Recycler, then they're not going to do much much because one extender means that the full combo is going to resolve anyway. So it's not like your opponent is going to stop recycling and then you're going to Almirage it and then go into your Monster Reborn to bring it back. No, it's not going to happen. It's much better to have another extender in order to go for your Scrap Wyvern immediately. So this is why I think there's not much reason to play Almirage in the extra deck just for this play. One copy of Succession, you set this with your Lib, and then you get your fridge back from the graveyard, you send another monster, and your Lib is another disruption when you link her away with Masquerena. One copy of Call by the Grave, which sums up the outs to draw total up to 5 with 3 Gamma, 1 Instant Fusion, and 1 Call by. And one copy of Crescendo, of course, it's the card that helps you survive cards like Dark Ruler no more, which gives you more interruption. This, on top of having Babel with cards in your grave, means that even if your opponent Dark Rulers or droplets your field, you're still going to be able to play, even if stuff like Appaloosa or your Masquerena get negated. For the extra deck, we have 2 copies of Galatia. There's no reason to max her. You're not going to get too many copies out of your extra deck because once you do your play, usually you're going to be able to kill your opponent during the second turn because you're going to Boral Sword or an Access Code. I am playing Boral Sword, but I'll discuss Access Code a bit later. But yeah, you don't really need to grind that much. And even if you grind, usually your grind comes from your graveyard, not from your extra deck. So this is why you don't really need to max out. Then the extra deck is actually kind of tight, so you need to fit in a lot of cards. So I don't think playing 3 is actually optimal. 2 are perfectly fine. One copy of Link Spider. This is here for 2 reasons. First of all, of course, like I said, with Gamma, you need to be able to go into your Link Spider with your driver in order to go for Anaconda, because Anaconda requires effect monsters. So it's not like you're going to be able to use Gamma and driver to for Anaconda. So this is the first reason. And the second reason is when you get Nibiru, then you can do even more stuff with this, because Anaconda requires effect monsters. You can't really do much with a token, but at least this will give you a fighting chance to be able to go into something, at least maybe Masquerena or an Anaconda, in order to be able to do a little bit more. Otherwise, you're going to lose to Nibiru 100% of the time if your opponent knows exactly when to hit you. One copy of Scrap Wyvern. No need more than 1, just 1. If you resolve this, then you're most likely going to win because you just get so much advantage that the board you can end on is so ridiculous. One copy of Lib. This is a crucial part of the combo because of World 1. You can use this to set your Succession. This will give you back your Golem from the grave, and then during your opponent's turn, you're going to link her away with Masquerena for an Appaloosa, and you're going to get a bounce, and also you can get an Appaloosa on the field. Talking about Masquerena, here she is. Of course, you can go into either Unicorn or Appaloosa. Usually you're going to be going into an Appaloosa, but if you think that you can protect your field with something like Dingirsu from something your opponent, some normal summoning something and running over your Masquerena, then yes, you can go into Unicorn as well, which is a decent play. One copy of Anaconda. Use this to summon your Winda, and there's some decks just auto-lose the Winda, then why not take advantage of this? The deck can do it, so yeah, why not? One copy of Barricade Borg Blocker. You do run this in case you draw a really, really bad hand that you, for example, maybe you have something you can go normal summon an Ash Blossom, use a danger, then go into blocker, discard your Orcust Nightmare, and then go into play. I know it's a very situational hand, but it does come up more often than you'd think in this deck, so I think just having this in the extra deck just in case is decent enough. One copy of Unicorn to go for your Masquerena, but usually you're going to be going for your one copy of Appaloosa instead, because it's just a better card than Unicorn. I mean, Unicorn is a very situational card against certain decks, but Appaloosa just gives you so much more value against combo that you can just negate multiple cards. And with stuff like Dingirsu on the field, being able to protect your Appaloosa from being destroyed where her attack draws low means that you will be able to use all of her negates. So even if you summon her with 2 materials, you can actually use 2 monster negates, which normally if you would summon Appaloosa with 2 materials in any other deck and you didn't have a way to protect her, your opponent was just going to normal summon something with more than 1600 attack and run her over, so it would be just completely pointless. One copy of Boral Sword. You can replace it with Access Code if you want, but I try to make the deck as budget as possible, and I know that Scrapyard is an expensive card, so I didn't want to put Access Code in the extra deck too. But you don't really need Access Code in this deck. I mean, you just make this and your opponent is not going to be able to survive because you can clear your opponent's board with Dingirsu before making this, so it's very easy to attack for game. You don't really need Access Code. This card is perfectly fine, but of course if you have Access Code, then you can play this over Boral Sword. 2 copies of Dingirsu. This card is the grind, this card is the removal, this card is the protection, this card does everything for the deck. It protects your Winda, so it's the combo breaker. It just destroys your opponent's board completely, so it's really good against control. It protects your cards. Yeah, come on, this card is absolutely insane. It also recycles your cards, so it basically what allows you to grind without having to play so many bricks in your deck. And for the fusion monsters, 1 copy of Winda. I explained this before. You send this with your Anaconda, you summon Winda. By instant fusion, you protect her during the end phase with Dingirsu, and there you go. You have a Winda lock on the field without even needing to run Dogmatic Engine. And 1 copy of Millenniumizer Stick, which makes your instant fusion the 5th way, being able to counter cards like Draw, Ash Blossom, or any other hand trap that goes to the graveyard as cost. And also this card is really good going second because you can play 1000 Eyes instead if you don't have access to this card, but just giving you the power to be able to play around hand traps. And also it's very, very similar to 1000 Eyes going second because it's just going to target the monster that's trying to negate. For your example, if your opponent lets this resolve and you get the monster on the field, if they try to use Savage or Abyss later in the game to negate something, you can just target that monster, steal it. If they don't negate your restrict, then you negate the effect, and you also deal with a monster. So it's basically the same, but it gives you a little bit more coverage as well. So yep, that's it guys. Orcust, I think it's a very, very fun favorite deck. People are going to enjoy playing it even more now that's actually consistent, because I know that the complaint of Orcust players was that the deck was not consistent enough after Harp Horror got banned. It just got so much worse because it didn't have the consistency to back up its power, because the power was still there, but it just didn't have the ways to get to that power play every single game. But now with 12 starter cards with Scrap Raptor, you can actually do all those plays very, very consistently, and you're going to enjoy a much more powerful and consistent deck for the upcoming format, which is going to be a very good format. So if you're a rogue player and you enjoy this deck, then yes, pick this deck up, pick up the cards you need, and you're going to have a really great time. So yep, that's it guys. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming videos, and we'll see you next time.